Welcome in, everybody, to the Important Nonsense Podcast. 32 teams in 32 days. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith, Mike Manning. How you guys doing? Carolina today.
I
mean, there's at least, a player or two to be able to talk about.
Yeah,
there's some controversy,
Coming off the Falcons, this feels like this is fantasy ground here to work with. Beautiful compared to the Falcons. Anything is, though. So
yeah, it's not a high bar.
Yes. Recording today on July 23rd. So if any information is out of date, that would be why. 12-team PPR for everything that we do. So again, adjust your settings in your head if necessary. If you play anything other than God's format, PPR. And yeah, if it's half PPR, it's half the fun, and then we all know no point. So
I also like how you updated it to say no point on the website, just to confuse the last 12 people that actually play standard.
That actually still play standard? Yes, exactly. It's not standard. But yeah, 12-team PPR. And then, of course, these are dropping every day. So you're just coming off the episode yesterday with Buffalo. We're doing Carolina today. But if you're part of our Patreon at the $3 or $5 tier, you get these 2 days early. So make sure you're signed up. Patreon.com/important nonsense. So let's get right into it, guys. Carolina, it was Sam Darnold last season-ish. For a good chunk of it, at least, it was Sam Darnold. There was also Cam Newton's zombie. So that was interesting to see, getting some brains walking around. There was the connection to Baker Mayfield all off season, and now he finally makes his way over there in the last, week or so. They made that deal. So Mayfield now comes over from Cleveland. The two QBs from the 2018 draft battling it out once again, this time on the same roster. But really, does it change that much? It's an improvement over Sam Darnold, but how much of an improvement is it over Sam Darnold?
5 spots in my rankings.
Specifically 5 spots.
Yeah, Specifically, okay. 5 spots.
Fair enough. I can't argue with that.
If we're looking at just fantasy, like Darnold is a lot more susceptible to run. Mm-hmm. So there was that boosts him, but is negative for DJ Moore or Christian McCaffrey, really. Mayfield has been a meh fantasy quarterback his entire career, even though he is a better real-life quarterback than Sam Darnold, without question. Mm-hmm. Fantasy-wise, he's a mediocre bye-week fill-in type quarterback.
Right.
And that was with, solid weapons around him. He had Odell, he had Jarvis Landry, he had the great backfield of Hunt and Chubb. So, his offensive line is going to be much worse now.
Yep.
So I don't think that you're going to can be too concerned whether it's one or the other when it comes to picking the quarterback position. It's more of Baker helping the rest of the weapons.
Right. And again, you've got on here, Sam Darnold was a top 5 quarterback through week 4 last season. And then last year was the year with mono, right? Isn't that why he was out after week 4, or was that a different?
That was the year prior. That was the year prior.
It's all so hard to keep track of with Sam Darnold because I'm just so disinterested that it's all back burner in my brain. I can't help
I'm pretty
myself.
sure the memes had a Jets jersey on.
Okay, all right.
So
yeah,
that's how I'm remembering it.
He didn't have mono last year, but the whole thing went cake in the rain. Eventually, He did get hurt, and then you've got it very clearly noted. Yeah, it started off very promising in 2021. Those first 4 games, it's like, whoa, okay, well, finally.
I remember us distinctly having the conversation, Neil. Is he finally arrived?
Right.
Is this the breakout?
Did it finally
you trust
happen?
Sam Darnold? Yeah.
And the answer was no.
The answer was no.
The answer was no.
Definitely
and it remains no. As you said very clearly, Baker Mayfield is very much a better real-life quarterback than Sam Darnold. So that's nice, but it doesn't matter for fantasy purposes. I have Baker Mayfield as fantasy quarterback 28. You have him as 33. And I completely understand why you would do that because there's no upside here, folks. There's no, this is just
we have it on here too that he was the top 5 QB through the first 4 weeks. But again, it's easier to pick out that sample size because it's in the first 4 weeks. But you could do that with pretty much anybody who still has a starting job after this amount of time and find it. I looked back at Baker Mayfield weeks 12 through 15 of the 2020 season. He was QB3.
Right.
So, I mean, you can find it if you look for it. It's just that just happened to be his window last year was Sam Darnold's one time he was usable. So if you're able to milk it for those 4 weeks, congratulations. You did it. But I think that's basically the end of the road.
There's no consistency to this. Not enough to merit the tiny, tiny, tiny amount of upside that you just pointed out.
Yeah, exactly. So we mentioned at the top Mayfield and Darnold. Behind them, they spent a 3rd-round pick on Matt Corral, who was supposed to be like the top end of this QB class and slid all the way to late 3rd round. It was supposedly a steal. But again, Neil, I will continue to bring this up for perhaps the entirety of us ever doing this podcast, the way that Carolina bungled their QB room last season, because you've got the number 8 pick in the draft. So there's no way a decent QB falls to us. Justin Fields, who we'll talk about next episode, falls, of course, to the Bears at 12. So you've got that you passed on because the day before the draft, for no reason, you trade a pick to get Sam Darnold, who the Jets were threatening to cut. Completely bungled the situation.
Now they've spent a year
more
later
capital on Baker Mayfield.
The Browns were probably going to have to cut.
Yes.
If you didn't do any,
they also, as soon as they got Darnold, immediately kicked in his 5th-year option to make sure that they would keep him under contract, which has worked out beautifully for them so far, right? So, I mean, this is just the way that they have handled this has just been a pure disaster, and I'll never let them live it down.
It's a real like leadership change type of situation when you kind of, because I'm looking at the roster too, and my one thought that just keeps ringing through my head is, man, I wish I was illiterate so I didn't have to read this.
Yeah. But again, to me, like, you draft a rookie, you would think maybe the rookie is going to fight with Darnold to get some playing time, but now you trade for Baker Mayfield. So I feel like they're going to go with Mayfield because that's the guy they acquired. And as I said, we've all said it here, that he's the better quarterback in their careers for the same amount of time. Baker Mayfield, almost 62% completion percentage to Darnold's 60%. Almost 5% of his throws result in a touchdown compared to 3% for Darnold. And then 2.9% interception rate for Mayfield compared to 3.2% for Darnold. So he throws less touchdowns. He throws more picks. He throws more inaccurate. Why would you play Sam Darnold over Baker Mayfield? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So Mayfield's going to be the starter, but does he stay healthy? Do they see what they have in Darnold? Does he get some play time? Do you play the rookie at all? It's all a mess. I don't want any of it, and that's why they're all so low in our ranking. Running back. This is another one where it's slightly easier to get through just because the top end of it is open and shut. Christian McCaffrey is Christian McCaffrey. The biggest hurdle here to get over is the injuries, right? Over the last 2 seasons combined, he's played 10 games. That's not great. And we talked about him coming out of college, that maybe he was too small to be a full workload guy, and he was dealing with the committee at the beginning of his career. But since being the full workload guy, he had one really spectacular season in 2019, and then it's been nothing but injuries since then. So if he's healthy, he's a top 5 running back. But the question is, can he stay healthy?
Doesn't seem to matter for the purposes of my rankings or your rankings.
Yeah.
Because I've got him in tier 1. I'm going right back on the horse here. Like, yeah. I'm willing to take Christian McCaffrey as the number 2 player off the board.
Right.
And now I will say, we are starting to get more nervous about this as time goes on with the collective injuries. But the undeniable upside and sheer, I mean, we'll go through it here formally in a moment, but this is a devoid of talent roster. That's why I keep making my little jokes, because there's just nothing here. So if he's actually healthy, what would lead you to believe that you're not going to watch the same thing you've watched when he's healthy the last 2 years? They just force feed him the ball. It's him and DJ Moore. And there's nothing else you can trust or want to deal with. So it seems like you see it the same way, Steve. I looked at your rankings. We both have him as number 2, firmly in tier 1. Mike, do you have anything to countermand to talk us off this crazy ledge?
I mean, I have a soft spot for McCaffrey because I drafted him the year that he went off. So I love him because he brought me a championship that year. But I can understand people that have drafted him since then being
bitter,
just a little bit nervous, or like have like a little bit of a nervous tick whenever they're talking about him. Like they're gonna have some concerns because, as we said, 10 out of the last 33 games possible, and 2 of those I think he left early with an injury as well. So it's like when he's on the field, he scores 25 plus points basically every time in PPR. Yeah. But I mean, you can easily lose your league if your first round pick, especially if being top 2 or top 3, doesn't play like 50% of the season.
And, as we talk about with our good friend Edwin Porras whenever he's with us, injury prone is a myth. It doesn't actually exist. So it's more of 2 fluke injuries that happened to be back-to-back for McCaffrey, not something that I'm concerned about recurring over and over again. He's only 26 years old. And to me, it's saying he's 26 years old, so he's still in physically great shape, but he's only played 10 games, which, yes, he's played 10 games over 2 years, which you would say is a negative. But from a running back perspective, that means essentially he's only had half of 1 season's worth of damage put on his body, and he's 26. So he's basically in the physical shape of a 24-year-old running back at age 26. If you want to spin it in a half glass full
or if you want to do the very derisive dismissal argument of he's played 10 games in 2 years, that's got to be a negative. He's got fresh legs.
Yeah, exactly.
Fresh legs.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's always a glass half full.
Yeah.
So that's the upside is just worth a number 2 pick in basically every draft.
So let's look at,
especially PPR.
In this scenario, let's say that you do end up a top 2 pick and you've got Christian McCaffrey. He's your guy. So then we're talking about handcuff, right? So who's the backup here? Last year it was Chuba Hubbard, and he was so terrible.
He was so terrible
that they went out and they signed the ghost of Amir Abdullah. They went out and signed the ghost of Royce Freeman. They picked up a bunch of fodder that the rest of the league didn't want just to not give him the football. That's basically what happened. Remember 2 years ago, it was Mike Davis, and that's the reason he got the contract in Atlanta that ultimately led to Cordarrelle Patterson being the guy for no apparent reason. So now they have signed Donta Foreman, which ironically enough, he was the one who filled in for Derrick Henry last season. When Derrick Henry was out, Foreman had a great second half of the season for Tennessee. So now they saw what he did. They paid him in the offseason to come in and be the number 2. I believe very clearly between the 2 of them, it is Donta Foreman that's the handcuff. And I personally would trust it. Neil, what about you?
That's why I actually added the note to the sheet, because if you're going to go with this Christian McCaffrey approach, one of the nice things about the Panthers is that they'll usually provide for you in some kind of handcuff manner, a la Mike Davis. And that's Donta Foreman is worth it to me. Yeah. There's not very many guys that I would say you have to get a handcuff for, or the handcuff would even be worth it. This is one, because the third person in line, as you started to mention there, Chuba Hubbard was really, really, really bad last year. And I'm not convinced that that's going to be anybody's answer to anything. Whereas Donta Foreman, not just last season with when he filled in for Derrick Henry, but a couple times in his career, he's made serviceable runs for fantasy. And he's actually pretty decent. The issue with Donta Foreman is, can he stay healthy?
Right.
Because if he can stay healthy, then I'm good with this. I'll do the Christian McCaffrey, Donta Foreman stack here, and we'll lock it in. But that's the one thing that makes me nervous, because if they both get hurt, you're up a creek without a paddle here. So that's the one note that I would have here. But I would want that Donta Foreman handcuff. Mike, what about you? Any notes here on the back half of the Panthers room?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that Foreman is completely worth handcuffing, even though I'm not even the biggest fan of handcuffs in general, or handcuffing specifically your running back in general. But Foreman showed last year when he was taking over for Henry that he had comparable stats to Henry in terms of an efficiency basis, like yards per carry, yards after contact, those types of stats. He was pretty similar to Derrick Henry in that Titans offense. So he's a good running back. It's just going to be, it's the McCaffrey question up in the air about how he plays this season for how long and everything else. And then it's also the workload. are they going to give him the full workload that they've been giving him for the past 4 or 5 years of his career? Or are they going to try and dial it back a little bit and have kind of a McCaffrey leading the way, but still giving the number 2 running back more than they've gotten in McCaffrey's career?
Yeah, 100%. And to me, like, I think what's the most appealing about this is when you look at guys like Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison. Madison's going in the 9th round. Zeke and Tony Pollard. Pollard goes way above that.
Way above that.
Mm-hmm. Donta Foreman's going undrafted.
Right.
You can have him for literally your last pick in the draft. You can have him off waivers for free. So he's the guy that I would want to handcuff with any of these because, again, we've seen the workload. We've seen he's able to handle it. And as long as he's on the field, he's a comparable fill-in to be an RB2. Into wide receiver we go. Starting X, DJ Moore, and then, of course, Robbie Anderson, not retired, on the other side. And then Terrace Marshall in the slot, forgetting Terrace Marshall. So they picked up Rashard Higgins from Cleveland. They still have Brandon Zylstra. They drafted Shi Smith in the 6th round. Not a big addition there. We thought that the loss of Curtis Samuel would hurt them more than it did last season, but really it was just the poor QB play. So from the top, it's really just DJ Moore. Is this finally his opportunity to break out? Does Baker Mayfield, after working with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham, give DJ Moore a reliable quarterback with a more accurate arm that can provide him the finishes that he's been looking for? Because I will run through this quickly here. But over his career, this is the QB and the PPR points per game finish that DJ Moore has had every season of his career. So Cam Newton, wide receiver 32, and that's when he was the number 2 receiver to fat Kelvin Benjamin. Not fat yet, but eventually fat Kelvin Benjamin. And then Kyle Allen, wide receiver 15, Teddy Bridgewater, wide receiver 24. That was the season he was getting outplayed by Robbie Anderson. And then last year, Sam Darnold and the zombie of Cam Newton, wide receiver 23 again. So he's been at least a wide receiver 2 each of the last 3 seasons while he's been a consistent starter. So does this keep him in that same range, or does he move up a tier?
No, he moves up a tier for me here. This is probably the highest I've actually ever had him ranked because he's not normally my cup of tea. The Panthers in general are not normally my cup of tea. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those situations where this I think is what it is, because I think we've established the clear pecking order here. Robbie Anderson is done, and forgetting Terrace Marshall is the most. We don't even need to do more analysis than that. That was perfect. And at this point, it's kind of just DJ Moore and the Pips. So I'm looking at him as a if you're looking for a guy who's currently going outside, just outside the top 10 at wide receiver, but could easily finish in the top 10, DJ Moore is your guy, because he's not really being drafted as a top 10 guy, but with the volume I'm expecting him to get, he could very easily just crash land his way in there if he can play out the whole season.
Right.
Yeah. If you're looking at DJ Moore, his ADP right now is wide receiver 16. And as you went off with those stats for his finishes, that's basically, he's already basically finished at wide receiver 16-ish.
Yeah.
For his best as a season. And as you mentioned, for all the quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield will likely be the best quarterback he's played with, unless his shoulder goes out again or something.
What a sad statement.
DJ Moore, Last year had the most inaccurate passes his way and the most interceptions thrown when being targeted. So not ideal things to have happen around you.
No, not so much.
It's only up from there, right?
Right.
So if they even like a slightly more accurate quarterback, and he still has that target amount that he had last season, which was I think around 120 or something like that, and he's breaking that 1,100 yard and 4 touchdown just purgatory he's been in the past 3 years. No matter how many he's increased in targets every single year, but he has not broken 1,100 yards or the 4 touchdowns.
So last year he had 163 targets.
Even way more. Okay.
For 1157. 93 catches.
So the targets and catches are going up, but that
it's the 1,200 yard mark that he's trying to get to.
Yeah.
Because he's hit 1175, 1193, and 1157. So he's always been like right there, but he can't quite get over the top. And to your point, right now he is PPR, ADP, wide receiver 17. And like I just rattled off there, over the last 3 years, 15, 24, and 23. So 17, you're drafting him basically at his floor, where he has been. He's got the ceiling to certainly move up beyond that. And Neil, I believe we both have him ranked accordingly.
We do. The ECR has him at 15, but you and I are a little more bullish. I'm actually all the way up at 11 because I believe this is the year. And then you've got him at 13. So we're both
I have him projected at wide receiver 9, but I'm a little more conservative in my ranking. But even still, I mean, like I said, I feel pretty solid about that.
I think this is finally the year.
So here's the question now. Beyond DJ Moore, is Robbie Anderson dead? Does Terrace Marshall matter at all? So everyone outside of DJ Moore in the wide receiver room, do they matter from a fantasy perspective?
My argument is no. I think Robbie Anderson is dead, and he's dead.
He's
to
certainly
me.
dead to
he's
you.
Dead to me. I can tell you that much. And
yes.
And as I mentioned a second ago, forgetting Terrace Marshall probably is the most accurate statement that's ever been uttered on this show. Mm-hmm. So we're good here. That's part of that's baked into why I have DJ Moore rated so high.
Yeah, I think this could easily be a like Deontay Johnson last year situation where, or last 2 years even, where it's just the target hog at wide receiver 1 is the guy you want, and then Robbie Anderson will have his games. He'll have a game here or there. It's going to happen, especially with just the fact that he is a good deep threat, and Baker Mayfield is a much better deep ball thrower than Sam Darnold. So he's going to have his games. I'm not going to be someone that wants to take the flyer on him at the end of drafts just because I don't want to have the headache. This is just an offense that, led by Ben McAdoo now, I'm not really going to have the most confidence in it being a high-powered, throwing it all around the field type offense. So you're going to want to look at McCaffrey, you're going to look at Moore, but you're not going to want to bet on. There's other number 2s and number 3s that I would feel much more confident betting on with the upside that they would have over Robbie Anderson or Terrace Marshall.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. The hope was essentially that the offense that ran through Teddy Bridgewater in 2020, where you supported really 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers in Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, and Curtis Samuel, that would just carry over to another 3-headed monster with Marshall taking Samuel's spot last year. And that didn't happen. Robbie Anderson fell off the face of the earth. Terrace Marshall barely played, and DJ Moore was still serviceable, but it was really just the one guy. And I feel like we're going to be in a similar situation here. As you mentioned, with Baker Mayfield, even when he had multiple options like Odell Beckham, like Austin Hooper, like Donovan Peoples-Jones, he was always honed in on Jarvis Landry. Whoever the favorite target was that he could rely on, he focused on one guy, got that guy the ball as much as humanly possible, and everybody else kind of just got the scraps of what was left over. So I think that's going to be a similar situation here, and I think the rest of it is, pretty much not worth it. Tight end, not even in the deepest of leagues. Nope. They will all be available on waivers. What a fantastic note, Mike. I love it.
I mean,
you're not wrong.
Wrap the show.
Yeah, that's it.
Wrap the show. We're done. Like,
That's it.
Wrap it.
They haven't had a suitable, usable tight end since Greg Olson. It's not happening anytime soon. So Tremble's an athlete that might become a usable fill-in every now and then, but he's not going to be drafted in any league.
Talk to me in 2026.
No, shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know. I'm sure I have to have him ranked, but I would have to look. 37, way off the page.
I've got him in like the 40s. Like it's there's nothing here, and the defense is unusable. Like,
and the problem is too, it's Trimble and it's Ian Thomas, and they really split the role. They never run 2 tight end sets. They just share the role, and then it always rotates which one of them is in the red zone. So you don't even know which one is the touchdown dependent one. They both are, and they have half a job. So none of it is worth it, even as a streamer. Just stay very, very far away. And we're going to be able to wrap this pretty quick here.
That's what I was saying. I wasn't kidding when I said wrap the show.
Yeah, defense and kicker is also a complete and utter joke. So it's really not entirely worth it here. Defense, obviously, they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. So not interested in it at all. They have Zane Gonzalez, who of 32 starting kickers, I have ranked 30th. So even in the last round of your draft, you have to have better options than Zane Gonzalez. It is not worth it, folks.
My argument, the synopsis for this show is that draft Christian McCaffrey, draft DJ Moore, leave the rest of the entire roster of the Carolina Panthers.
Well, draft Christian McCaffrey and handcuff it at the end.
Right.
And then that's
okay.
it.
And then leave everything else out there for someone else.
It's
2.5
someone
guys.
else's headache.
It's 2.5
guys. Or your league mates draft somebody else on the team.
Yes, 100%. All right, closing notes on Carolina at all? That was it for you, right? Just the 2 guys and wrapping.
2.5
perfect.
without the foreman.
Half a guy, yes.
Yeah, 2.5.
All right, well, me and Neil will get to do our Sad Bears act tomorrow, back with Chicago. Wow. Mike, I'm sorry that you have to sit in for that, but it'll be a unique experience for you. Don't worry.
I mean, I'll enjoy it, I think.
Don't enjoy it too much. Your job depends on it. But again, make sure you're subscribing, following everywhere. Patreon.com/important nonsense if you want these videos a couple days early. And until tomorrow, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!